Om. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us, O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. And the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent, and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay. Yesterday we were talking about we had used a little bit of Ramdas teaching about 3 levels of consciousness. Do we recall the 3 levels? So in our words, what are they? What's the first level?
Like the subject, object, duality, material world.
And identification with this body. Yeah. And the second level?
Is connecting with the soul.
Yeah, it's even hard to... So, it's not connecting with the soul.
You're identified as the individual. Like you're aware.
Not even.
The higher self.
So here's what he described as the 3 levels of consciousness. The first, the lowest level being identification with this body. So I'm doing, I'm thinking, I'm speaking, right? So it's this experience that I'm doing, like that. Second level of consciousness is the experience where one is observing the person doing. Right? Yeah. And he observed that since his stroke, that was his experience. So that one alone is very, very hard for the intellect to relate to, isn't it? That's why we don't even remember it from the discussion yesterday. And it's very hard for the intellect to relate to, for the person to relate to. But we can grok it. I mean, we can consider, reflect upon it, and allow for it, yes? And we spoke of the near-death experiences, which are not really near-death experiences, which are experiences of leaving the body, where the person is observing the person.
Oh.
I'm calling person. It's not really soul. You wouldn't say that. You could say astral.
Okay.
Like that. So, but where the experience is, I am now observing myself, what I thought was myself, which is on that operating table and was just called out. Right? So second level. Third level, that he had shared from that perspective is God seeing God. So the highest level of consciousness, aware of itself, aware of consciousness itself. Okay, we pick up here. Because now, what Krishna is speaking of, this awakening. We're still yoga of renunciation. And I'll just recap very briefly. By steadily letting go of the fruits of their actions, yogis attain peace. By mentally renouncing the fruits of their actions, yogis' minds become disciplined. God, the indweller, does not directly create forces that move in the world or anything that happens here, nor is God in any way affected by them. Nature, Prakriti, does this. God, who is omnipresent, does not measure anyone's virtues or vices. Because inner wisdom is veiled in ignorance, people therefore are misled and err. That's that dreamer. Because inner wisdom is veiled in ignorance, people therefore are misled and err. Huh? So where is peace right now?
Within.
Where's wisdom right now?
Within.
Is wisdom disturbed by what's happening here?
No.
Is the thought of wisdom disturbed in any way by anything that happens here? So why is it not accessible to me right now? Why do I imagine myself to be this body? Because why?
Ignorance veils.
Ignorance, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it. Just that. When the sun is behind the clouds, is the sun really behind the clouds? Right? Just through ignorance, I would say, or believe that the sun is gone when the clouds are there. Right? But with wisdom, I know the sun to be there all the time. Undisturbed. It doesn't even know about the clouds, for gosh sakes. What are you to me? You only take your existence from me anyway.
That's true.
I'm undisturbed. I don't need to see you.
No.
Oh. So that omnipresent does not measure anyone's virtues or vices. Why? Because the virtues or vices belong to
The clouds.
the cloud.
Physical.
Thank you, Apollo. Because inner wisdom, which is omnipresent, which is ever present, everywhere present, right? Which is all knowing, which is full, all full, is untouched. We have, as a person, you see, the thing is, we could never be a person, but we can pretend to be really hard. So hard that we finally imagine ourselves to be. So from this lower level, from this personal perspective, that sun, which is the wisdom, seems to be apart from me.
Seems.
It seems to be apart from me, right?
Yes.
It seems to be apart from me. But is it apart from me? No. Never apart from me.
But is it the false self that creates that separation?
As if.
As it.
It's just identification with the cloud.
The physical. Yes.
It's just identification with the cloud. So, and here, when you know who you are enlightened. We'll read a different translation of this. This is 16. And this is where we closed yesterday. When you know who you are enlightened. In that self-realization, the darkness of ignorance disappears in the light of true knowledge that shines like the sun, revealing the Supreme. Those who continuously think about that self merge with it and settle into it. Whoever holds this as their goal will no longer be subject to rebirth, because self-realization dispels any remaining flaws. So we can discuss these a little bit this morning. So as we sit here and we study the Gita, what faculty are we using to study it with? I mean, it's simple, we know. The intellect, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry? You said intellect. Yeah. Conscious mind. So we're using the conscious mental faculty. So we're listening and we're rolling it around in the mind. And maybe we're writing down notes to help us to remember and all of this, right? So we're working on it with the mind. With the intellect are the arguments, we're evaluating the arguments that we're hearing, the points that are being made. Mm-hmm. Do the points resonate?
Yes.
Do they seem to be true?
Experiential.
They seem to be true. So the intellect can do this. That's not the experience of awakening, of enlightenment, but it prepares for it.
Points towards it.
It points towards it. It points towards it. When that enlightenment comes, it comes like the sun shining where it's been clouds before. So it's in a flash. We call it grace. We can say grace. It's at this higher level. So we prepare for it, and this is what Lord Krishna is teaching, how to prepare for it. The preparation is done with the intellect leading the charge, as it were.
Yes.
And the intellect is discovering through its query, through its inquisition, through its self-inquiry, through its study of the scriptures, through its experience, through the experience that we've had,
yes.
saying, oh my God, the way that I took myself to be is not true, right? Mm-hmm. The way I experienced the world was false. Mm-hmm. Mm. And I'm getting that. So the intellect will say this. Inside, it will assert. Do you see it? Mm. You see that happening? Yeah. So that's, so we can say that's the process of awakening. When the intellect is no longer holding on to that which it took to be certain in the past. Right?
Right.
Yeah. So that ego notion is there. Still, it's there, isn't it? Still, when you open your eyes and engage in the world, there's still a feeling of being separate. It's there. Yes? Ah.
Rarely.
Sorry?
Rarely.
Rarely. Very good. Very good. Very good. Someday it won't be there at all. So very good, yeah. And it's not a test of manhood, because if it becomes a test of manhood, we're not there. Sitting in a bar saying, yeah, I don't feel any separation. What about you, Joe?
Let me have another one. I'll tell you.
I think it's subtle. The trickster.
And get subtle. But in the intellect, which we tend to identify with ourselves as the chooser, that which is choosing between the red shoes or the black shoes, or do I go to satsang or do I go to the bar? Right? That's what we identify with as the chooser. That's the intellect, the conscious mind. We tend to identify with this, right? And also choosing between the ego notion and Krishna, or the ego notion and the light, or the shadow and the light. Also choosing between these, right? In the same way. It's not a different way, not really. But now I'm really the light. So I hear, so the intellect hears, and it resonates more and more, let's say. And this is exactly what's happening here in the Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna started in chapter 1 completely destroyed. He forgot everything. He forgot that Krishna was there with him. He forgot who he was. He forgot what his duty was. All of this, right? He forgot everything. He crashed. He freaked out. That was your word, Kartikeya. He freaked out. So, which is our situation. So the ego had control of him. The intellect was colored by the ego, even though he had a very pure intellect. Still in those moments, the intellect got colored by that ego notion, and he chose that shadow, not even knowing it. And then what happens? Lord Krishna says at some point when he finally, crashes, Lord Krishna says, what are you doing? And then starts teaching about nature of self, right? And ever since then, and all through the Gita, he's teaching about not just nature of self, but how to realize one's self, isn't it? And he says it has to be done on the battlefield, has to be done in the field of action, but we have to renounce the fruits of the action. Right? And we have to do as if our lives depend upon it. Do what's good, right, virtuous. Do what's to be done, as if our lives depended upon it. Right? With all of the motivation that we can muster. But not to be desirous of the fruit. To come into that completely selfless place. To serve fully and completely, but not wanting something for ourselves. Taking the ash which remains from the sacrificial fire. So, Om Haram.
So we have to, in order to actually get this, like Arjuna, we have to meet uncertainty until uncertainty starts to vanish and is less present in our everyday lives. Then we can start building on that. Is that how it works?
We have a disease. We're suffering from a disease.
Yes.
And the disease is not cured by saying we're all one.
No. But the inner uncertainty in life, like looking at...
The uncertainty only exists in the person.
Looking at the old,
So
the ego,
yeah.
false self.
So he's giving us the prescription. Let's not lose track of the prescription he's giving us. Okay? So, and what does that lead to? He said it leads to peace.
Oh.
It leads to the unveiling of the wisdom. The unwrapping of the sun. It leads to the evaporation of the smoke. And then what happens?
Peace prevails.
One discovers oneself to be the sun. That's grace. It's not an intellectual discovery. It's not. The intellect can't go there. The intellect is the cloud.
You can conceive something, that's not it.
The cloud can conceive of the sun
Until you feel it.
until you know it.
Right. That's the,
No, don't say that.
don't say feel.
You have to listen.
Okay.
Don't try to presuppose.
Okay.
Okay, just be present.
I am present.
Okay,
I'm trying to understand.
until you know.
Because to put it in the words.
Until
of the
you
Gita,
know. It's not about the words.
I didn't think so.
Until you know. When you know, you know.
That's true.
But it's not an intellectual knowing.
Can't be. Experimental.
So let's read a little bit of what Swami Venkatesh says. Okay, your glasses here. There you go. When one wakes up, and he's talking about from dreams here. When one wakes up, his dream with all the dream objects, pleasant and unpleasant, dream experiences, happiness and misery, dream actions, good and bad, dream creations, heaven and hell, and the dream personality, which is bound to a delusion, vanish. So if you look at your waking up from a dream first and compare what he's sharing to that, you'll see this. Right? When you wake up from a dream, what happened to the dream personality that you took yourself to be during the dream? What happens to that personality? Do you care about it?
Who cares?
Do you recognize when you're awake that you're not it? Okay, so the same is being shared here. And again, if you're trying to relate to this with your dream character, it's very difficult. It's actually finally impossible.
Gets burned.
to relate to what's being shared with the dream character, you're going to have to open the heart and listen deeply. But interestingly enough, the intellect can relate to it. It can relate to it. So it can, and it's required in order to take the journey, as it were.
The intellect sees it and looks beyond that.
The cloud sees the sun.
Yeah.
The cloud sees the sun. The cloud can never do anything but see the sun. It cannot be the sun. The cloud can never be the sun.
It's the veil. It's the shape.
The cloud is just a cloud.
Yeah, it's the shape.
Oh.
You're giving me a great, deeper appreciation for the mantra, because I feel like with what you're saying about the analogy of the sun and the cloud, the mantra takes you beyond the intellect.
The mantra is a direct connection to the sun. Mantra is a direct connection to the sun. Mantra is given by the sun through the cloud. So when one wakes up, his dream, with all the dream objects, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, the dream experiences happiness and misery, the dream actions, which are good and bad, the dream creations, which are heaven and hell, and the dream personality, and the dream personality is bound to the delusion, right? In your dreams, whatever that dream character is that you've taken yourself to be, that dream character is bound to a delusion. It only exists within the dream, right? And I don't know, you may have had dreams where they would come in a series and the same character would be there and you'd identify with the same character for multiple dreams, like a Sherlock Holmes series or something like that.
I think I always have the same character. I've never had like that.
I doubt it.
Huh. I never remember
I doubt
that
it.
character.
You might have to stretch.
I'll have to reflect.
Might have to stretch. So upon this awakening, one immediately realizes that he is a cell in the body of God, that his self is the self of all, not by virtue of his oneness with the all. He is the all, not the deluded and ignorant I, but God's nature prevails here and functions in him. And it functions in the entire universe. This, however, is not mental activity, nor intellectual assent, nor a pious belief. Pious, a strong belief. It's not a strong belief either. It's not actually faith. It's knowing. What we're accustomed to is that the only knowledge is something that we work out in our head.
It's given.
But knowledge is knowledge. It exists at the deepest levels, at the highest levels. It exists. That's what we're unveiling, right? So if the veil is unwrapped, then there's knowing. And so you could paraphrase and you could say, knowing that I am not this character. We could just add that. But it's not a thought like that. It's knowing.
It's unexplainable, almost to another person.
Because if you identify with the thought, I'm not the dream character, isn't that just a very subtle?
But the thought I'm not the dream character is very helpful in sadhana.
Okay, that makes sense.
Very helpful. You know, we have this little cold going through. No, it's not COVID. We have this little cold going through. You know that. And so I'm telling people that get it. Here's your mantra. I am not the body. I am not the mind. Repeat it all the time until this is passed. That comes from Swami Satchidananda, and that's the quickest cure. He says, it is a realization. One who has it need not intellectualize it or verbalize it. Now here we are trying to do exactly that because it's satsang. But it's not something that needs to be expressed. Right? There's no urge to tell people.
You feel content. You could say maybe satisfied.
Well, that or the I is satisfaction. It's not, in fullness, there's no seeking. So, yeah, definitely. There's again, the Buddha describes it as the absence of this or the absence of that, right? What did you get? And it's just a beautiful description because I didn't get anything. But I'll tell you what I lost, which is fear, anger, greed, not this, which is really the best way to describe the absence of the feeling of separation, the absence of anger, the absence of need, the absence of needs. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on in the morning. Any other questions or comments on the subject? Yes, dear Benita.
So, the intellect can't get you there.
Oh, it is required in order to get you there. But it has to stop at the door.
So what gets you there? Grace?
No, listen. The intellect is required to get you there. But it has to stop at the door. That's enough. No, I mean, we're talking every morning about what is it that the intellect's needing to do. So this introspection is required. And also it's needing to purify this life, purify this action. It's needing to make choices which are selfless, which are guided by the light. This is sadhana, right? And through this process, it takes us to the door. The door opener opens the door. Grace. You can do what you can do. And then you find, and certainly the intellect sees that I am not what I took myself to be. Certainly the intellect sees it. This is actually required.
So is it almost like Jnana Yoga can only take you so far, eliminating what is this and what is not through the intellect?
Then you get to draw a card.
Any of the yogas,
You have 60 cards.
the practice of any of the yogas can take you to the door.
Yeah. Would you say bhakti is the door opening, devotion?
Okay, it's your turn.
I'd say all of them are one.
Is that 50?
It's not,
Let me check.
we can talk about one being supreme or something like that, but they're all one.
Or would you say
Bhakti is jnana, jnana is bhakti.
Would you say the intellect takes you to the surrender of bhakti? That's why it has to
Okay,
stop.
ask for
The surrendering part.
Well,
card. Yes.
there's an assertion of some supremacy of bhakti, and I won't buy off on that.
We didn't know that. So,
The supremacy of surrendering, though.
The supremacy is God, and God is all. God is all. God is bhakti, God is jnani, God is meditator. God is selfless, karma yoga. So whenever we're motivated towards any of these, there's only one source for that motivation.
Because it's funny, because in bhakti, you have to surrender your so-called intelligence of how to do.
In jnana, we have to do the same. In Raja Yoga, we do the same. What does it say in Raja Yoga? Ishvara Pranadhana. That gets forgotten often. Self-surrender to the Lord. In Karma Yoga, who are we doing it for?
Lord.
They're the same. The practices, yeah, and the different personalities, different personas relate in different ways.
70? I mean, not 70.
Oh.
60.
They'll take us to the door.
Oh.
70. Okay. Wait, no, let me
Okay.
Just a practical question. What shlokas were these?
These are.
So I would definitely.
We did recap from 12, and they're 16, 17.
12 through 16.
We focused on 16, 17.
You have two.
Okay, let's close with final prayers and we'll do.
Actually, I want to do something else. No, I will be right back. Okay.
There's a funny conversation that comes between a teacher and student and disciple in South America, and this is Christian tradition, and it just comes to share. But the two were sitting on a mountain, and they were in practice sadhana. They'd come out of meditation, and the student asked the teacher, "How will awakening come?" And the teacher said, "The sun will rise." And the student said, "When will the sun rise?" And the teacher said, "When it's time." "Will anything that I'm doing make a difference?" And the teacher said, "It will prepare you for the sunrise." So it's preparation for grace, we can say like this. And then when the sun rises, where does it rise? It rises within oneself.
There is this saying that we're knocking at the door of heaven, please open.
Yes.
And then when the door swings open, then it's showing us that we were on the inside, actually.
All the time. All the time.
That's a good.
Oh, very good. Yeah, there are a lot of visualizations. Okay, let's close with final prayer. Page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Surandim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukmiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Surandim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukmiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Surandim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukmiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshiyamamritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Makashi Dukhabha Bhave Asato Ma Sakramaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityur Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. Humble Sakguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki. And for all of the saints and sages of all traditions.